Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to this Food Shift workshop on food citizenship and building engagement. My name is Sofia Parent. I'm Campaigns and Policy Coordinator at Sustain. And Sustain is one of over 30 partners of Food Shift 2030. This is a big European project, and it's all about promoting a citizen-driven transition to a better food system. We work with a network of 9 food accelerator labs all over Europe, and this workshop will touch on to practical approaches, resources, and inspiration for developing local engagement and food citizenship. And a lot of what you're going to hear is coming from one of the food accelerator labs in Ostende and some of the partners that are involved in Food Shift. So this is a second of a series of webinars whose aim is to disseminate to a much wider audience of organizations all around Europe about what we're learning through Food Shift. So we had a first webinar or a first workshop on governance at a local level just at the end of last year, and there will be 2 more workshops this year. So if you want to stay connected with the organizations and places involved in Food Shift and like-minded organizations to know about future events, please stay in touch. And I'm going to circulate details for our Rise Up email list through which you can stay connected. So this is a workshop, so it will offer opportunities to hear from each other, to interact with other participants. And we have a colleague from an organization in the UK called Food Matters, Callum, facilitating this workshop today. But if you're interested in other events like webinars we organize through Food Shift, do sign up to the Rise Up list. So this is a very short introduction because, as I said, this is all about your participation, and I'm going to pass on to Callum to guide us through this workshop. Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Sophia. Start off by just saying it's a real pleasure to be in this room with you all. A lot of my work tends to focus on the UK, so it's really exciting for me to be in a room that spans Europe. I come from an organisation called Food Matters, as Sophia mentioned. One of the things that we do at Food Matters and our role in the Sustainable Food Places programme is to help facilitate wide stakeholder and community engagement. And we do that through a sort of range of participatory tools and exercises, activities and events that we lead people through to be able to make decisions, to be informed, and to touch on some of the bases that we're going to go through today. So the approach today is one of sharing, one of learning, and one of participating. So it's an opportunity really for you to hear from each other. I'm not really here to share much knowledge, more just to help you share the knowledge between yourselves. So the idea is it's going to be inclusive and hopefully a bit inspiring, and an opportunity to sort of share thinking on how you could approach this very broad but exciting topic of building engagement in food work in your area. So we're going to go through sort of 4 different parts in the hour and a half that we have with each other today. I should also say I have a bit of a habit for speaking fast. I blame my mother. If I'm speaking too quickly, please feel free just to put your hand up and ask me to repeat myself. But we're going to go through four parts today. We're going to look into a little bit of the context of why it is that we're having this conversation to begin with. I think Martine is going to take us through that, maybe a bit with Sophia as well. So a little bit of what do we mean when we're talking about citizen engagement and participation. Then we're going to go on to a bit of an overview of the Food Shift approach, some of the challenges and some of the responses to that, and that will be for about 10 minutes or so. And then we're going to go on to a little bit of a facilitated participatory exercise. So the sort of stuff that I do with food organisations on a day-to-day basis. And it's about just asking you some questions around the work that you're doing. We're going to start talking about some of the buzz that you feel is in the areas of work that you're focusing on right now. And we're going to take a moment just to share some thinking in some breakout rooms. We'll bring that back together, have a little chat about how all that went and some of the key bits of learning that came out of that. And then we've got two great speakers with us today, Guy Paul and Chris and Kathy, both from City of Ostend, and Chris Walsh from Kindling Trust in Manchester. And we're just going to have a little bit of a chat with our two guests, a bit of a panel discussion around some of the things that we've talked about today, and we'll just bring it all together and round off, and we'll be finished at about 2:30 UK time, 3:30 Central European time. Excellent. So if we're all okay with that, I'll pass. I think, is it back over to Sophia, or is it over to Martine? Sophia, for the context setting.
Directly to Martin, the expert who will give us an
Directly to
overview
Martin.
of what we're talking here.
Okay, thanks a lot, Callum.
Excellent.
For the introduction. My name is Martin Krivits. I work on the Food Shift project for Institute for Agriculture and Fisheries in Belgium. And I would like to share with you a deliverable, some insights that we have from the Food Shift project about how to empower citizens. So I have a small presentation on that, which I hopefully can bring to you in about 10 minutes. So I'll first share my screen, and I do this also. So what I would like to talk about is I would like to talk about strategies, some key strategies for citizen empowerment. So what are we talking about? I would like to share a draft a Food Shift Citizen Empowerment Scheme. The question that we are addressing in this empowerment scheme is, how can we empower citizens in the food system? So specifically within the food system, how can we give an empowering role to citizens? And this is not such an easy task. Citizens are all over, but they are not so easily engaged within transition processes. Now, very broadly speaking, you often hear about 4 levels of engagement. It's also called the ladder of participation. And then it's about informing citizens, consulting citizens, collaborating with citizens as a city, as a sustainability program, and empowering citizens, giving the means to the citizens themselves to take up things, in this case, within the food system. Now, what often happens is that we consider this as quite separate steps. And then often we make a kind of equation between, on the one hand, let's say, informing, and when we will inform via social media, we will inform by setting up communication channels. Consulting, okay, we will do a survey, there will be a kind of questionnaire sent out, that's consulting. Collaborating, we will collaborate, we will organize a workshop, that's collaborating, right? Empowering, okay, we will have some project subsidies, so the people will be able to do some things on their own. But this is often, considering it as separate steps, is often not the best way, because all of these steps are actually interconnected. And you need to create an awareness within the citizens. You need to create a collective motivation. And without creating such awareness and collective motivation, not much will happen. Now, I'll try to distillate 4 steps, or 4 interconnected steps from the deliverable. In the deliverable, there are more aspects which you can read also, but I try to emphasize 4 things that are interconnected, and I will also try to give 2 examples applying the four steps, applying the scheme, to say so. So, and I could also try to use a kind of metaphor to illustrate the steps. So first of all, when you want to start the process of empowering citizens, it's important to create awareness about issue at stake. Because without it might seem obvious, but it's really crucial to inform people that your program, your project, your food strategy is out there, and that there is some kind of sense of urgency attached to that. For instance, in the city of Ostende, where I've also been working on behalf of the Food Shift project, we noticed that a lot of people were not aware that there was a food strategy on behalf of the government or the municipality of Ostende. So without them being aware of there being a food strategy, they will not happen much. But of course, there's a difference between simply informing people and being sure that they are informed, that there is an awareness created. And this leads towards a second step, which is, I think, crucial, is when you try to engage people, you try to relate to the concrete experience of those people, because people, like especially citizens, they have limited time, they have limited resources. So when you are able to connect to a concrete experience of those citizens, you will be much more easily engage them. And therefore, I will talk a bit about that later. It's interesting to focus on those people that are already interested within already interested and engaged within the food system. And food is an interesting aspect, because everybody is experiencing food, and it's quite easy to relate to food. A third step is then to connect that individual experience, let's say, to a larger scheme of things, to foster motivation. For instance, that a personal activity of somebody, let's say somebody is weekly organizing cooking sessions within the neighborhood, that you can connect this to a larger goal, to a larger challenge. For instance, saying, okay, you are weekly cooking with all the people of your neighborhood, but you're at the same time also crossing bridges between different social groups. You're crossing bridges between different ethnic groups, for instance. So you're contributing to something larger. And this is important. Also, it's also important to communicate about other people that are within the same group going for the same projects. And fourth step is to, when you have connected with citizens and their experience, and you have put this in a larger collective, let's say, a challenge, then you also, it's important to provide concrete options for participation, because otherwise people are, you expect from people to organize it all by themselves. So, and you might have an overload of choices. So it's also good to have very concrete options for participation. Now I'll illustrate those 4 steps, and also it will be very interesting to perhaps discuss this later on. Summarizing the steps is it's putting something on the table, so showing that there's something out there, that there's an issue out there. It's putting a meal on the table that's appealing enough to connect with the person that you're eating together with. It's connecting to the larger scheme of things, to the larger food system of which this dinner takes place. And it will be, it is about organizing future meals where you will eat together in the future. So that's a way of kind of metaphor where you can understand this, these 4 steps as well. Now, I would like to very shortly apply those 4 steps to the strategy that we have been deploying in Ostende. So in Ostende, there is a food strategy, and one of the goals is to empower citizens within the food strategy. Can you still hear me? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, we can hear you, Martin.
Okay. So the goal of this Ostende harvest, Ostende oogst, is to empower citizens within the food strategy of Ostende. Now, first of all, what we need to do is we noticed, and that a lot of people did not know about the food strategy. They didn't know, let's say, ordinary citizens, they did not know there was something as a food strategy within Ostende. So we need to put something on the table, and we need to communicate that there is a food strategy out there, and there were several ways via the communication channel that there was a nice campaign introducing the food strategy to the larger public. Kati can maybe tell a little bit more about that later. A second step that we did is to connect to people's experiences. And the way that we did this is that we send out a survey to a large group of people in Ostende using a platform, and we asked them, do you have interest in food topics? Do you have an interest in cooking, in producing food, in recipes, etc.? Do you know the food strategy? And also we asked the question, if they know it or not, but would you like to be active in the food strategy? And in that way,
Martin, just to let you know, 2 minutes left. Sorry, okay. Martin, to interrupt you there, just to let you know.
Yes, thank you. So that through this survey, we found a group of people who was already interested in food, And we also found a group of people that is indicated that they would be willing to participate in food strategy. And then what we did is we also tried to frame this in a larger picture and say, okay, when you are doing this, you're also contributing to the food strategy of Ostende. And we organized specific workshops where they could get to know what is going on in Ostende, and also how they can participate within the food strategy. So there are concrete ways that we presented to them. There are these working groups, and these working groups where they could, which is the idea that they could participate. So this is these 4 steps in the food strategy of Ostende. Now, at the same time, the 4 steps are also being applied within Copenhagen University. Within Copenhagen University, they want to make the students aware and engage the students, all the students of the university as a target group, to engage within changing the procurement. So here also the 4 steps are being taken into consideration and put into the scheme. And first of all, there's a communication that there is a procurement procedure, and that a lot of meals are not yet local, organic, or healthy, and that they want to change that policy. So there's a communication. Then there will be a survey where they will ask to define those people who are willing to have a concrete role within this changing of the procurement. This will be connected to the larger scheme of things. There will be a collective monitoring device. That's some of the ideas, working with a live counter to show how many meals are saved or how many meals are more local, to invite farmers to the university to create a collective group. And there will be provided concrete participation options. So there will be 1 or more co-creation sessions together with the food procurement agency of the university, together with food tender experts, and together with some students that are willing to take up an active role. So these are 2 examples, very different examples, where you can apply these steps towards empowering and engaging citizens. So it would be interesting perhaps to also reflect later on, perhaps, how can this be applied in your situation? These steps, and do you see these same steps as relevant? And do you think that that you're working on several aspects of this already now? So I'll stop here, I think, with this question that we might take along later on.
Martin, thank you very much. Very helpful. I'm a sucker for analogy, so I really enjoyed that analogy. So a meal on the table, making that meal appealing, making sure that meal is connected to a wider system, and providing concrete options for participating in that meal, I thought was a really nice way of quite simply talking about that process. And I think it'd be great to come back to some of those questions when we go on to the discussion group later on. So thank you very much for that. Sorry to jump in there at the end. We've got a lot to pack in the next hour and a half, so apologies if I'm pushing speakers on the time, but thank you so much for that. We're going to go straight on over to our next speaker, who's going to talk a little bit about the approaches, the challenges and responses to food citizenship. So I'm going to pass on over to Annika now. Annika, would you like to introduce yourself to the group?
Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Annika Frübers from Agrater, also part of the Food Shift Consortium. And yeah, as you already said, Callum, I'm going to talk quickly about food citizenship, and I'm going to be referring to a series of webinars that has been taking place in the course of the Food Shift project. So I'm kind of give some reflections on this webinar series. Within the series, the FALS that Sophia already mentioned, the Food Shift Accelerator Labs, were discussing about strategies to involve citizens, sharing their experience, finding maybe new solutions. And I kind of want to give you a condensed results on these workshops, on these webinars. So of course, just a little bit to the background, the participating city regions, the FALS, have kind of a different origin. Some of them come from motivated groups of volunteers that are forming up because they have a common idea that they want to realize. Some of them are municipalities, and some of them also come from the private sector, like companies or technology competence centers. So they're kind of have a different initial background. Also, what was obviously differing a lot when discussing about how to involve citizens in the initiatives was that their structures are different, their resources are different. like financially, technically. Also, they had underlying values that differed, as well as different skills. I'm going to give you two examples. Kati is here today. So the city of Ostende, they were involving citizens in city dialogues around their agri-food park. Why, for example, in Italy, in Bari, the overall goal was a very different one, because they were creating an urban gardening community on abandoned land and trying to involve citizens there. So the actors kind of differ. That's my point. So I'm going to give you a very quick overview of the major challenges that were being discussed or identified and discussed. And then afterwards, I'm going to give you an overview of possible solutions to these challenges. So the first major challenge that was identified in these webinars was that, of course, it is always difficult, especially in the long term, to mobilize citizens to join initiatives. But it was discussed that it is even harder to mobilize and involve farmers. Also, in the initiatives, it was often a big problem to find farmers close to city regions who could supply food for the consumer initiatives, and thus address the local aspect of food. Another major challenge that was identified was that it is difficult to enroll a wider circle of people, of citizens, beyond the people who started the initiative. This gets especially harder the more the city food network is growing. Another big challenge was finding a balance between the participatory and the more democratic approach or functioning, and also on the other hand, on the efficiency, or the economic efficiency that could potentially improve and establish on a long term an initiative. Also related to this challenge, it was discussed a lot that transforming unstructured citizen initiatives into a more formal organization with legal existence, with public funding, is hard, especially when the idea is to retain the enthusiasm and the commitment that existed in the beginning. Another major challenge for more is finding a way of communicating and stabilizing the relationship between the municipalities and the citizen-driven initiatives, the latter often being a wild mixture of voluntary work and salaried work. Then, of course, always a challenge, the funding investments, as well as generating available land in the city area where the initiative can take place. And the last challenge was spreading the message of food low tech and enabling low tech carried out by citizens to reach a certain level of identity and a certain level of capacity to resist or to coexist between the high tech of big businesses. Okay, and now I'm coming to the solutions that were discussed or found together in this series of webinars. So it is 7 approaches of solutions. Of course, all of the solutions have to go case by case. There is no one fits it all solution. But yeah, just to give you an overview what was discussed among the city regions. So the first solution would be a participatory budgeting. Now this means that the municipality starts the incentive to make a local food strategy more citizen-driven. So the municipality provides a budget, but it is the task of the citizens to decide how this budget is going to be located. So for that, the citizens can define different actions, and then they can, for example, vote how the budget should be allocated to these actions. Then the second solution is a change at farmers' schools. This is also due to that it was often discussed how farmers could be involved in citizen-driven initiatives, and that it is hard to motivate them and to integrate them in these initiatives. So the idea here was to start at the education of the farmers and to start awareness raising of opportunities to enroll the farmers into these citizen-driven initiatives in the farmers' schools already. Another solution is the be innovative in your access to land strategy. So this means that there is an option for municipalities to buy land, and this also refers to the last solution, again, farmers, to contract farmers. The municipalities could contract farmers to produce according to specific requirements so that their willingness to join would rise. Nevertheless, it was seen in the webinar series that recruiting farmers is demanding and is a hard job, and there is a lot of experience sharing necessary in this area. So the fourth solution that was discussed is the development of a social business model. So the thing is that there is a need for a long-term financing of initiatives, and not just hopping from project to project funding, but long-term funding. And for, of course, yeah, again, this has to be solved case by case, but an idea was that urban agriculture could be turned into community-supported agriculture, or that citizens could be trained to start new grassroots initiatives and sort of become social entrepreneurs. Then another solution, again, connected to Kati and Ostende was, yeah, it's very straightforward, was like a kickstart by a citizen letter to the mayor. So just straightforward, writing a letter and speaking out what you're planning to do. Two more, then I'm done.
Sorry, Anika, just 2 minutes. And
just two more, just
Thank you.
10 seconds.
Okay. Excellent.
Yeah, then another solution is argue about your impact with evidence. So it makes a lot of sense to transfer your benefits or to show them in numbers, to visualize them, so that you can show the social return on investment and help to raise the long-term funding and also to make the initiative more attractive. And the last one, very easy, and this kind of brings me back to the beginning of what I said, is link with other cities, link with other actors, and do the peer-to-peer learning, share your experiences like what we did in the webinar series of Food Shift. And I'm done, but the last thing is, if I'm gonna post a link in the chat to the whole document of the webinar series, so that you have access to all of the fact sheets that I was talking about. Thank you.
Anika, thank you very much. A really interesting list of challenges, I think, certainly from our context in the UK and some of the work we do on the Sustainable Food Basis programme, things we very much experience as well, certainly in terms of widening that engagement from those that might not already be involved or engaging with farmers. Some of those questions around that efficiency versus participation is really interesting, and how you move from sort of informal organisational structures to formal organisational structures. And it's really great to hear that you're breaking down some of those barriers and moving forward on that. I'm sure everyone's got plenty of questions to ask. I have just noted a couple down. We'll come back towards that at the end, if that's okay, just so we can make sure that we can get through the programme first. But again, thank you, Anika, a really interesting bunch of both challenges and solutions there. Excellent. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next section of the workshop, which is about you talking to each other, really. And we're just going to introduce a question here to sort of engage with that conversation, open up that conversation. This points to a little bit of the work that we do at Food Matters around community engagement and stakeholder engagement. And quite a lot of our work is about going into spaces, whether that be organizational spaces or community spaces, and asking questions to encourage a conversation that can inform and guide decisions and discussions moving forward in your food systems work. And when we're invited to these kind of spaces to talk about citizen engagement, what we often like to do is to do almost a bit of a demonstration of the way those sort of questions could be asked and the sort of answers that come out of them. And in doing so, providing an opportunity for you to be able to share some learning between you. So that's what we're going to do now then. So I'm going to just introduce the question and I'm going to ask you just to think about it for a couple of minutes, just to give you time to sort of think about your response. And then we're going to open a Mentimeter. If you haven't used that before, it will be a link that takes you to a website where you can put some quick ideas down and we can look at them. and then we're going to break off into groups and have small discussion. So Sophia, are you able to post the question into the group? So this question, where is the buzz? This is something has come up a lot in our work, certainly since COVID, and now in the UK, moving through the cost of living crisis, and this sort of real acknowledgement of the grand scale of the tasks that we have ahead of us in terms of food systems change and all the many different things that are involved in that. And a realization or an acknowledgement that for many resources are very tight, time is very tight, and there needs to be some sort of feeling of being able to focus and prioritize. And Martin talked about being able to engage people already interested in that space and the sort of ways that you might do that. And this question of where is the buzz right now in the work that you're doing in your local food system is starting to help explore that, being able to identify where energy is right now, where work's happening, it's exciting, and start talking about ways in which you can both identify that and be able to connect and expand upon that kind of work. So I want you to think about your place in particular, think about the city region that you work in, think about the food work that's ongoing, maybe it's something you're directly involved in or part of the local food system more generally, and think about where is that buzz right now? Where is the energy? How could that energy be built on? How can you expand that perhaps into other work? Think about who is doing what and where, and how does that activity, how does that energy encourage and support engagement with food citizenship? And if it doesn't, how could you expand that energy to be able to incorporate more participation and more community engagement? So quite a big question there, and just an opportunity to reflect on your own place. So don't feel too tied to those questions. But for 2 or 3 minutes, just have a think now about your place, your food system, and where the buzz is, where the energy is, and how that relates to community participation. And then we'll just take 2 or 3 minutes to think about that, and I'll bring the group back together and we'll open up the Menti. Does that sound good? Does anybody have any questions? Stephanie, do you have a question there?
Yes, but we've posted a Mentimeter link in the chat. So the invitation is now to follow that link in the chat and answer those questions. We'll give you a couple of minutes to do that, and then we'll put you into those breakout rooms for you to discuss that further.
Excellent, thanks, Stephanie. And those breakout rooms will be on for about 15 to 20 minutes, and then we'll pull everyone back together and share some of that learning and hear some of the conversations that we're having. Thanks so much, Stephanie.
Okay, great. Hopefully all of you have had the chance to look at that Mentimeter link. I'm now going to put you into your breakout rooms, and we'll see you back in about 20 minutes.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. I hope there was some interesting conversations going on in your group. Certainly was some interesting chats going on in mine. So we thought we'd just come back now and just sort of share in a group maybe some of the interesting things that have come out of those discussions. Maybe something that you learned from that discussion, and maybe that can be something you learned about your own place by just having an opportunity to talk about it, or maybe something that you learned from somebody else. Does anybody want to start us off with something that they took away from their chats with people?
Yes, I can start.
Thank you very much. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thank you. So the thing that I want to say is that from this chat, from this room, like as I was with my partners as well from Fusili, Project Fusili, and other partners from Canada and from UK. So we can see that all of us, we have the same goal, is to ensure sustainable diets, to ensure a special kind of food security within cities in many ways, and by involving many stakeholders. It depends on the situation, it depends on the conditions, but the main goal is the same. And I think which is so good because we're all of us here want to do something good with food, want to ensure sustainable health diet to all people. So I think that this was really so interesting to have this this exchange in room. Thank you.
Excellent. And if I may ask, is there any way that you've approached some of that community engagement in your team? Sorry, I missed the name of your team. Did you say Fusili? Is that right?
Yes, I belong to the team. I'm one of the partners, like of the teams of Fusili, but I'm from the University of Valladolid. So the University of Valladolid is one of the partners of Fusili project.
Excellent. And you've done some community engagement work yourself?
But sorry?
You've done some community engagement work yourself. How have you approached the sort of citizen engagement side of the work that you're involved in?
Well, in our case, it's a city, so we don't have in our case, we are a university, we don't have a city. So for example, we're not the one who have the city who's managing it, but we are the universities who are supporting the cities.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anybody else want to share some learning from their group, either about your place or something you heard about somebody else's place? Perhaps someone would like to share some of the citizen engagement work that they're already involved in. Sophia, did you want to jump in there?
I really wanted to hear from the others, but since there are no volunteers, in my small group, we talked actually that it's a tricky time and we should be aware of all the pressures people are under after Brexit, in the case of the UK, COVID, lockdowns, cost of living, etc. But we also talked about the proliferation of the food bank model in the UK, and I would just like to test in this group whether this is a problem in your area, because we felt that too much funding, resources, energy is going into a model that is unsustainable, and it's only made possible because of the excessive surplus that results from the retail sector. So you don't have to answer here, but please just add in the chat if you have experience from where you are in Europe.
Thanks, Sophia. Yeah, really interesting point. I'd love to get some feedback. Does anybody want to jump in on that before we move on? Does anybody have any perspectives in terms of that, the dominance of the food bank in solving our problems, which is certainly the context of the UK, the political context at the moment, that food banks are often being relied upon to solve the sort of the food system issues that we have, and of course fall far short of that, as important as they are. Anybody have any points on that they want to jump in on? No.
Well, yeah,
Vera, it looks like you had oh, sorry, Kathy, it looks like you have your hand up as well, and Martin, I beg your pardon. If you can raise your hand in the reactions, just so that I can see it, that would be brilliant. But I see, sorry, Kathy and then Martin after that.
Yeah, no, you go. And I saw that Karen Stewart also has her hand up, so I'll leave it to them.
Oh yeah.
Okay, in that case, we'll jump over to Martin.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that. So the food banks approach is indeed, it's also, for instance, the case in Belgium where I live. So it's basically, I'm searching for the words, but it's like, yeah, it doesn't give a lot of autonomy to the one that is in food poverty. You know, you go and you receive, and there are some very interesting programs. I think they are looking into now also in France, based on United States, Develop Your Food Buck. And Develop Your Food Buck programs in the States, it's about when you spend, you get a kind of food stamps or food checks, and when you spend them in the short supply chain or in organic food, you double up your food buck. So you the government doubles up the value of what you spend. And this is a win-win situation. It stimulates people within poverty to consume more healthy and fresh food, and it stimulates local economies. And this has been a program that's been going on in the States for more than 10 years. So it's worth looking into that. And in France, they are also changing things in this respect. So this kind of government approaches, yeah.
Thanks, that's very interesting. I don't know if you're able to pop the link into the chat for that. Would you consider that then a sort of a cash first approach? Would that fall into that kind of approach? Is that how you would look at that as in terms of ensuring that people have more money in their pocket to be able to
cash first, but I guess it's giving people the money themselves to autonomously spend it. Yeah, something that at least there is more autonomy, and it's not just what you get from the food bank, somebody else deciding what you buy. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that. I think we're going to jump over to Karen. I think, did you have something that you wanted to add?
Yeah, we've got a food bank here. We've got community larders. Obviously, the food bank is donated food. The larders, they pick up the surplus food. But a lot of funding is sort of given to those sort of things, and it's very much sort of firefighting, and the council encourage that as well. So there's not so much sort of work going on behind the scenes to try and create a different sort of food system. So that's obviously why I'm with food partnerships. That's what we're trying to do, and empower people to grow their own food and things like that. So yeah, but I think that the food bank are now actually going to go over to like a sort of supermarket system, so that instead of like somebody picking the food for you, they pick it for themselves. But then they were talking about trying a cash system instead. So it would like reduce the amount of people going to the food bank, because our food bank is the busiest in the south, I think, or the country. I'm not quite sure. Yeah, thank you.
Wow, thanks, Karen. Kathy, did you have something you wanted to add there as well?
I was just going to say it depends on who you ask it to, because my colleagues who are from the social grocery, of course, they are very happy with what the food banks are doing, and also they're picking up excess food from supermarkets and other shops. But their concern is very much the new models that have been arising, like Too Good To Go and that kind of things. So that there is a lot of shops and smaller shops and supermarkets don't have any excess food anymore because of the Too Good To Go systems. And I don't know if this is something that exists in every European country, but that's something of their concern, that they say, well. And I do agree with the people who said this is not a sustainable model. This should not be there, but it's just is the realistic thing that there are people who cannot afford the food. So there needs to be something for that. So yeah, I was just going to add the competence with new systems arising.
Thank you, Kathy. So it was a little bit of a segue from our focus on community engagement for this session. So we're going to go ahead and bring it back towards that topic, and we're going to move on to sort of a facilitator, a chat between two of our speakers. So we've got Kathy, who's on the line already, if you like, and we're also going to include Chris Rolls from the Kindling Trust. Do you both want to just briefly introduce where you come from and what you do? Well, we just heard from Kathy, so we're going to jump straight to Chris, and then we'll come back to Kathy to introduce after that. Chris Walsh from the Kindling Trust in Manchester. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Yes, I'm based in Manchester. I work for the Kindling Trust. We're a family of projects and social enterprises that acts across the supply chain. So if you go on our website, you'll see a whole range of different projects. And what we've been trying to do over the last decade or so is kind of create a supply chain that works for us and our members. So ranging from working with farmers and supporting new growers, to introducing volunteers onto the land, to at the kind of farming end, to empowering and supporting individuals to grow their own food, to cooking courses, veg bags and the like. And basically what we're trying to do with a very small number of people across Greater Manchester is do two things. Try and see if we can create livelihoods, farming livelihoods at one end, and address food insecurity at the other. So what we want to do is have people paying for food, paying for good, sustainable food that's affordable, and as much of that money making its way back to the growers as possible. So we do a range of projects. Some are very focused on generating income. Some are there to support beneficiaries.
Excellent. Thanks, Chris. And if I may ask a similar question that we broke off into our breakout rooms to talk about, in terms of this sort of community engagement or building food citizenship from the ground up in your work, where do you feel the buzz is in that, and what sort of things are you engaged with in terms of that community engagement and participation aspect of the work that you do?
Yeah, I was really struggling with this because it is a really difficult time, particularly in the UK at the moment, to feel positive. Sophia was saying that actually there are some positives in the negatives, in that, you know, it's really easy to talk about food with individuals at the moment. You know, in the UK, we've just had in supermarkets, particularly a shortage of tomatoes. You know, so talking to people about why that's the case is quite easy, and the solutions are there, and we know what the solutions can be. It's just then finding ways to do that. There are a number of high-profile food-focused projects in Greater Manchester that have got a lot of interest and a lot of funding recently. From our point of view, they're kind of quite top down, so they don't address all the things that we're concerned around food sovereignty and stuff. But there is an interest in food and climate change, and I was reminded that there is in the UK now a movement and acceptance of food banks, although are needed at this time, aren't a solution. So there is kind of energy around those sorts of things.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, we had as a program, as the Sustainable Food Places program, had our conference last week, and this conversation came up quite a lot in terms of both acknowledging the immense pressures that people are under, but also talking about how food is climbing up both sort of public consciousness and political agendas, and how you can start being able to take advantage of that to open up the sort of conversations that it sounds like you're being able to start to do. Kathy, I'll bring in you now, a little bit of a different context in Belgium, but also I understand that you come from local authority rather than sort of civil society. For you, where is that buzz around community engagement and participation? Is there a buzz in your local authority? Are you able to do that work? And if so, sort of how are you approaching that?
Yes, hello. Sorry, I will properly introduce myself. So I'm Kathy. I work for the City Council of Ostende. But actually, this is only quite recent, since Food Shift. And before that, I was more the citizen person, very involved into the food system, and hence my interest for going for this job. So now I do it from within a local authority, but I'm still engaged in a community initiative. It is community-supported agriculture that we started like about 10 years ago. And when I saw the question about where is the buzz, well, I also said in the breakout room, maybe I am very much biased in my head if I think about the buzz. But one of the things that we experience is that we have an enormous shortage of allotment gardens. We do have a lot of allotment gardens historically in our city, but still there is a lot of interest for people to grow their own food. And this might have a link with the costs of food, of course, and also people wanting to be outside with COVID and everything. But that if you say where was the buzz, the reason why I I personally took the initiative to set up a community supported agriculture scheme, so where people could go and pick their own vegetables. You become a member, very much I think like in Chris' system, you become a member. Is that I felt a lot of people live in apartments in our city and don't have a garden, or people don't have time or don't have the strength to work in a garden. And when I was that citizen coming to the city council and saying, look, we need space for a community supported agriculture, it's very different from a community garden. So you pay the farmer to have your share of vegetables for a whole year. And I was very lucky that the city council was immediately very supportive of this system. And we were provided space to do it. And after a whole process of 12 years, we've got actually quite good infrastructure for it, supported by the city, but bringing together a lot of citizens around this food. And it's not only well, the citizens who are a member, but it's only a group that is very engaged in helping out in the vegetable garden with the farmers. There's a group who's now engaged in planting a food forest. There is a group who's engaged in cooking activities. So starting from this community, so CSA, community supported agriculture, a whole lot of other community initiatives derived from that. And I think in our city, that was an incredible start for actually developing even a food strategy. So that was for us, where was the buzz, giving the opportunity to people to have organically grown local vegetables and help out in the garden if they wanted to.
It's really great to hear sort of both sides of that story. One, you approaching as a citizen, and now you being involved in that sort of local authority delivering on that. In terms of your perspective and the way that decisions are made, decisions that impact your work, do you feel there's a route for sort of institutionalized community participation in that? And if so, how would that process be undertaken at a local authority to ensure that you're engaging citizens in the decisions that are being made?
I think in the beginning it was very much a bottom-up initiative, but I think like with everything, it very much depends on the politicians who are there in the council at that moment, and also the civil servants in their city who are supportive of your idea. And once you can prove that it really is of benefit to so many people, I think it is rooted in there. And that was the great thing we could do in Food Shift. We could write a food strategy and write it in there that we provide space for food production, and we involve the local farmers, and there would be a citizen engagement scheme. So having this in a strategy that's approved by the council was actually a very good thing. And I think we are still quite an exception in Flanders to have this model. Some people, I have to admit that some farmers are not so much in favor of this system because they say there's too much involvement of the local authority and they like to be more independent. But that it's got two sides, that point. I mean, there was a lot of investments, and if I say a lot, that it comes down to maybe €1 million that was invested in this whole infrastructure, making sure you have the water, making sure people could have picnic places there. So I think having the city engaging in it in such a high committed way also gives more guarantee for the future that they will keep this on as a big priority. So
yeah, thanks, Kath. That's really interesting. Certainly in terms of, again, it goes back to what Anika was talking about, that sort of participation versus efficiency discussion that often gets brought up, and where that line and where is that appropriate for the role and the project that you're involved in. Chris, if I could just go back over to you, and maybe when we're talking about engagement now and from coming from civil society, what's your experience with engagement with your local authority, and how do you feel in terms of their engagement with participation and citizen engagement more broadly?
Yeah, so we were actively involved in Sustainable Food Cities, a UK-wide network, about 5-10 years ago. And there was that really benefited us and the projects we were involved with, but we really struggled to move beyond the discussions around food poverty. And in the end, we kind of stepped away from those forums and those networks. We have a city that is, the way it's democratically structured, you have a very kind of core, which is Manchester, that is very urban and very polarized. There's a lot of money, but there's a lot of poverty as well. And then you have a load of wards, boroughs around Greater Manchester that are kind of mixed, urban, peri-urban, rural. And each area is very different. You know, in Manchester, it's all about inward investment and food poverty, and they're not interested in food growing and stuff like that. If you go out to a borough where there's a much more of a mix, people are interested in food production, yeah, it's a very difficult place to work. I think it benefits us if we have something very focused that we want or need to do. But in terms of influencing broader debate around food justice and stuff, we've really struggled with it individually as an organization and collectively as a sector.
And I think from our experience on Sustainable Food Places program, you have a lot of that where you feel able to communicate on some aspects and very much shut out of other sort of decision making fora. A question for you both now, but also to the wider group, because it's something that I wrote down in some of the earlier presentations around the need to engage with people that might not typically be involved in food work or food systems work or have an interest in food in that way. And this I think it's referred to as the participation gap in the sort of the wider literature on participation, or being able to engage with people that wouldn't normally be the sort of people that you'd be able to engage with. I wonder if either of you have had any experience with that, had any successes in that, and then open up that to the wider group as well, if anybody else wants to share any experience they've had with reaching hard to reach people.
I'll be very quick. We focus a lot of our efforts on white working class communities in South Manchester. We also work with emerging communities and refugees, but we do make put quite a bit of effort into working with those groups of people, partly because of the areas that we're physically based, but also we feel that it's a real opportunity to engage people who aren't engaged in these things. When we work with refugee groups or others, there's a real openness around, you know, there's a real strong food culture there. But with white working class communities, we really struggle with that. I mean, that's very black and white. And the other thing is we have been recently working with businesses we wouldn't normally work with, but accessing their staff has had real impacts on them. And they are a real group of people we wouldn't normally engage with, and they would normally come across us. But because they're told to go there for the day and volunteer, we're really able to talk about food and food justice.
Thanks, Chris. Before I jump to Kathy, in terms of your engagement with say refugees, how do you approach that? How do you reach those people that otherwise might not be so reachable?
Yeah, so we usually through word of mouth and physically kind of meeting people. When we have events or plan projects, for us it's often making sure that we focus on those individuals and they don't get crowded out. So a lot of the events we hold, we only do it through inviting people, word of mouth, or there's a next level where we'll put up leaflets or posters and won't advertise on social media. So depending on the group and the activity, we target and engage people in different ways. The one thing we're always aware of is if it goes on social media, instantly it'll get booked up by a group of people who, are out on their smartphones all day. And that creates a dynamic and a culture in an event. So we're keen to do stuff. We send our teams out. Just it's easy to find refugee groups in some areas we work because they're all stuck in one hotel. So.
Yeah, I think I got asked a similar question recently in one of these groups, and going to the people I thought is generally the right answer. Go stand on the street corners, go to the hotels, and go and talk to those people that you're trying to engage with, and don't expect them necessarily to come to you through your channels. And having that sort of diversity of approaches as well sounds like sort of good advice in terms of spreading that net wide. Kathy, I'll pass that similar question over to you then in terms of trying to reach those harder to reach people and maybe the approaches that you've taken to do that.
That's not an easy one. Like the standard members of the CSA, you know, they are all middle class people who can also afford to pay for 1 year. It is the price for this year will be €440 for a year of vegetables, which is actually not so much, but for a lot of people, this is a huge sum of money. And we did since last year, we try to have a range. So people who cannot afford this 440, they can pay less. And then others who feel they can afford more, they can pay more. So, and last year it nicely balanced out. So that's one way to be able to to have unemployed people as a member. And we do have members who are unemployed, but still those are not the groups that you've just mentioned, like refugees and people who recently moved into our city. But for that, we work together with several other organizations. Well, one of them are my colleagues from the Social Grocery, and they actually have very good infrastructure also in terms of cooking with people, in terms of a very easy entry for people to come and have a coffee, to chat, and they have good contacts. So we've set up a community garden, so growing food together. We said you have the seeds, you grow together, you cook together. So we have a program for them, but that's actually only a small group of people who do that, but we hope to widen that group. And also we work with other citizen organizations in the city to really reach those kind of people who don't speak our language, for instance, or who recently arrived here. So it's working with those groups that have this reputation of bringing those people together and also know how to approach them. So working with them is the best way to do it.
Thanks, Kathy. I think that's really important in terms of acknowledging where sort of perhaps your outreach or network falls short, and being able to engage those organizations that are representing those communities that know the right languages to speak, quite literally in some cases, and know how to engage with people, and the importance then of partnership working, of making sure you're bringing those people onto the table and having those sort of wider discussions. Really, really interesting conversation. Something that I personally struggle with working in the food world, the sustainable food world. It can sometimes feel like it's quite exclusionary because there is some inevitability about good food being more expensive. And so it's great to start to hear about those approaches of how we can broaden that space and make sure that it's an inclusive space. So I'll open up to the floor more generally now. Perhaps you want to comment on that last question in terms of engaging with people that aren't necessarily usually involved in food work, or any other comments or questions for our speakers, going back to the start of the session, or for Kathy, or for Chris, or for anybody else. I'll open the floor now to people that want to jump on in. I think, forgive me, I'm going to pronounce your name wrong. Is it Letitia? Yeah, you pop your hand up again. I saw that before. Do you want to jump in there? Sorry, how do I pronounce your name?
It's Letizia.
Letizia, sorry. Thank you, Letizia.
Yeah, no worries. So I actually had a question for Kathy in terms of how do you connect different groups? So you have lots of different great initiatives and groups that council kind of has the visibility of, and coming from the similar kind of perspective, as I work very closely with Birmingham City Council and their food systems team, we have a lot of great community organizations that we support with grants and are kind of aware of the work that they're doing, but then bringing those different groups together who are usually quite spread out throughout the city city is much more difficult. So I think there is definitely a lot of work that can be done in terms of improving how we connect different stakeholders across the city, and whether that's something that just happens organically, or whether that's something that you in your kind of experience think the local authority can help with, facilitate.
Yes, I definitely think we can help facilitate as a local authority, because it does. Yeah, I'm always surprised it doesn't happen automatically, because some people are just working on the same topic and not working together. And one of the things we've done together with Maarten is we organized citizen participation event, and then we invited all these organizations working on food topics. It could be quite different. One is growing food, the others are more cooking activities, but letting them present themselves so the citizens could get to know each other, but also they got to know, the organizations got to know each other, and some of them had never talked to each other. And another thing I found very useful, and that's also maybe a question column to what you asked, how do you reach other people, is the last year we've organized several more cultural events. For instance, a food film festival. We were showing movies, and there was a link with food, but also with much wider topics. And we were reaching people we've never seen before. And, you know, I've been a volunteer with the CSA and other initiatives for more than 15 years. So normally I quite well know the people in my city who are working on food. But with things like a food film festival or a theater festival, or now recently we organized a photography contest, and now we have an exposition on agriculture in our city. So taking it from another angle, trying to reach people who are culturally interested, for instance, also helps to bring in new people. So, but this year, definitely, I think this is something we can do from a city, is bringing the people together and just organizing those meetings, because they don't have the time. They're so engaged with their own topics they're working on, and so busy with their voluntary work that they don't have time to take that on top of it.
And sorry, just a quick follow-up. So, and do you find that more of a kind of informal settings work better than formal kind of workshops and meetings? And if so, what are the kind of some of the settings where you meet them and facilitate those conversations?
We did both, but I'm always more in favor of an informal thing, with some food, of course, food prepared by organizations, food prepared from people with different backgrounds. We, like our social grocery, I keep on coming back to those. They have a great community of people and a lot of volunteers, and they are so proud of from their home country to show what they prepare. And it's amazing the kind of food people prepare. And some people, they don't really have anything, but they will come and prepare the dishes, and it brings everyone together. So I think more informally works much better. Don't invite the politicians and have a very stiff thing in a meeting room, but just informally. Yeah.
Thank you both for that. That was a great discussion. I've certainly learned both from time working in a school a few years ago to the participatory work that I do now. If you put a nice meal on, people will come and talk to you. And as you say, what a wonderful opportunity to showcase some local foods, some diverse food as well. I see, Vera, you have your hand up. I think I'm just going to look at Sophia, because I know that we're running out of time. Do we have enough time to take one more question from Vera, yes. Sophia, or do you want to wrap up?
Yes, we have a minute.
Go on then, Vera.
Really quickly.
We'll have it. Okay, Vera, over to you.
I defer to someone else if someone has a question. I just had a little plug. Yeah.
We'll happily take a little plug, Vera. Go ahead.
Yeah, just on diversity, inclusion, and anti-racism, the Sustainable Food Places Good Food Movement Building Guide. I shared the link in the chat. We have a section on diversity, inclusion, and anti-racism in there. So there's some kind of tips and advice. I think one of the top things is when developing a project, it's like who gets involved in the work is in a way like who's at the very beginning stages in those initial conversations. So sometimes we just invite the very people involved, the people leading on the work, but that could be the invitation to invite someone who's working within representative spaces, not necessarily to do with work. So I suppose not just keeping the initial phases exclusive to people involved professionally in food. And I think there's something else. We have a few case studies there, is like the idea, like, don't ask people to come to you, come to people. And that can also mean when you're hosting an event, instead of one big event in a central place where people might not leave their communities to go somewhere new, as actually decentralized. What about lots of little events across your municipality? So just a taster of ideas might be useful. Do download the guide and see if anything sparks inspiration.
Thanks, there. Very useful little plug. Yeah, if there's one takeaway, go to the people. I can highly recommend as a good way of starting your participatory work, and also thinking about when you're involving people and ensuring you're involving people from the get-go in terms of the way that you're thinking about the problem from the outset. Excellent. Thanks so much, everyone, for the discussion. I'm just going to pass over to Sophia to round us up.
Thank you, Callum, and thank you, everyone. And we plan to try and encapsulate everything that has been shared here, the various resources, not just from FoodShift, but others, including the excellent toolkit that Vera's just mentioned. So we tried to encapsulate all of this in a blog that will be available online with the recording of this session. So keep an open eye for that. And another invitation, if you want to continue to stay in the loop with any future workshops that we organize, do sign up to the email Rise Up list. That's the easiest way. And finally, a bit of homework for everyone. If you came out of this workshop inspired, do continue to think how you're going to build up on the buzz in your area. We talked about what that is in your area. So how are you going to build on this? And secondly, how does current activity contributes to wider strategic aims and the wider change you want to see in your area? So take this away so that it just doesn't stop here and continue in all the local activity that you're promoting. And a final thank you to all our speakers today. You've been excellent. You shared so many useful resources. Thank you so much, and thank you to the facilitation that Callum you provided. And see you at the next workshop. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Lovely to see you all. Bye.
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 Thank you, everyone. Have a nice day. Bye.
Thanks, Kathy. Bye.